Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday for the 13th. Oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that until just now. I guess I should have said something about that in the Morning Post. You've likely found out that that's true already. No worries, I hope, for any of you. Friday, the 13th of 2017. We're doing okay otherwise. I did note in the Morning Post. This puts us about 3% of the way through the year 2017 already. Keep up the good work. We'll get there. I guess that makes it about, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.5%, a little bit more, through the term of the 115th Congress. So pretty soon we'll have a chance to vote one more time and get all this taken care of. If we can just make it to then. Of course, no guarantee that Donald Trump will still be president then, but no indication of anybody looking to hold him accountable for anything in particular. So don't look to be rescued by norms, the Constitution, or any of the like. We are entering a new era. And one of the best indications of that comes from, there's two pretty good indications. One, there is the report yesterday that Jason Chaffetz at the Government Oversight Committee apparently thinks it would be a fantastic idea rather than take up any of his time explaining to his daughter. Remember when there was that one point at which he was out. I'm out of this whole Donald Trump thing. I'm going to have to explain to my daughter about this whole grab her by the, okay. I'm still not super comfortable with that whole episode, but man, it's just insulting. And, remember when he was going to have to explain to his daughter, but then he figured out a way to explain it to his daughter because he was voting for Trump. Now, rather than explain the whole thing to his daughter, he's just going to subpoena her, and that will take care of everything. He will now be going after the Office of Government Ethics. He's, on behalf of Donald Trump for daring to suggest that Donald Trump might not have solved everything with his ridiculous presser the other day. Of course, he solved nothing. The professionals who know that have said so, and now they're going to be in trouble with Congress. What a fantastic development. There's much more on that front. I'll get to it in just a second, but let me acknowledge this morning's tweet from Bill in Portland, Maine. Daily Co's Radio is live now. That is the purpose of his having tweeted that, and my reading it to you acknowledges it as such. Listen to Kagro X. That's me, David Waldman. Listen as I run over 1,000 pairs of LL Bean boots with a steamroller. And if you know anything about LL Bean boots, it probably wouldn't make much of a difference what I ran them over with. They're kind of floppy, rubbery things. Although some of the hiking boots, I guess, would have those heel supports, those all-important heel supports crushed. Let me take this opportunity to complain about a pair of LL Bean hiking shoes I bought several years ago. I'm very annoyed. The heel is too narrow, and I have, I like to put some extra arch supports, some orthotic inserts into my shoes, especially the hiking shoes. And the heel's too narrow, and it doesn't sit right, and I can't use the boots with the orthotic heel supports, which means they're pretty much useless to me. So damn you, LL Bean from a couple of years ago. There you go. I'm very angry about these things. I can't keep up with all the boycotts. I've lost track of them, for one thing. I think there's an app out there that actually tries to keep an accurate current list of who you're supposed to be boycotting if you're super progressive, or if you're, I guess there's probably one for, I don't know. I haven't heard about it, but why would I? But I imagine there's something like it. Basically, boycott everything if you are an ultra-conservative, alt-right weirdo. You can't go wrong with that. Make your own everything, I suppose, is the way they would go. All right, well, let's see. It is Friday. That means we are temporarily, again, without Greg Dworkin on his new schedule. And we'll see. Door is always open for Josie Duffy Rice. We still haven't really settled into a predictable routine But that's okay. The main thing is, of course, that the door is open, and I'm still in that stage of the working relationship where I just try to assure Josie, hey, if you've got something and you want to share it, go on ahead. The door is always open, and you don't even really have to wait until Friday, honestly. But I don't want to pressure anybody. I want them to feel comfortable coming on and sharing a story, either on the spur of the moment, or calling and saying, hey, I'm really busy today, or just nothing happened. I don't know. So the door will be open for her. We often see her in the 10 o'clock hour. And you know what? As a matter of fact, since Greg isn't here today, if you feel like coming in the 9 o'clock hour, that's rare that anybody says, yeah, I'll come in earlier in the morning. But the door is always open. Let's get to some of the news. Right now, well, let's see. There's a couple things happening. Bill says LL Bean has a lifetime guarantee. I can send the boots back even without a receipt and get new ones or a refund. Oh, okay. Well, maybe I should get the refund because they don't work. I don't know if I can't get new ones. I assume all the heels are the same width. Anyway, these are the sorts of things that I tend to think of as my own fault. I didn't have the arch supports when I tried them on, and I should have. And now it's a usual practice. It's a best practice. It's so good. It's the best. Anyway. Donald Trump is an idiot, and that's all there is to it. We'll catch up on all the ways that that's true. Let me tell you a little bit about the Chaffetz thing, by the way. Let's see. I have two stories. Oh, look at this. Justice has a comment. I always wear Patagonia when I eat my LL Bean lobster bisque. Do they make lobster bisque? Does it come from Linda Bean's Perfect Maine, or do they actually have their own LL Bean branded? They might. Isn't there an LL Bean edition of a car out there somewhere? Or maybe that was the Eddie. There was an Eddie Bauer edition car someplace. I think LL Bean. I don't know whether they ever co-branded a car detail package. I don't know what. I missed out on all these things. It makes no difference to me. Okay, so LL Bean, but Patagonia, by the way, we sort of touched on this yesterday. It used to be that sort of the outdoorsy hiking around equipment, there weren't that many suppliers. Now there's 10,000 of them. You can even find specifically progressive brands and marketed in specifically progressive style stores too. So plenty of alternative to the LL Bean boots. If we're boycotting, are we boycotting LL Bean? I don't know. It's unclear to me. And it's unclear to me how much of LL Bean's revenue goes to Linda Bean's pocket. Is she the sole, not the sole proprietor, obviously, but is she the sole beneficiary of whatever trusts? I don't know. Anyway, there's plenty of good people working there, too, who probably are pretty embarrassed. I did see that there was some significant effort on behalf of the company to distance themselves from the person, Linda Bean. I don't know how well they're doing with that one. But on the other hand, it's going to be a long time before I need waders or duck hunting boots, so I got time to ponder it before I make my next purchase. And even if I do, I wouldn't be surprised if there aren't very many progressive places to buy waders. What do you think about that? You think there's more than I know about? All right. Call us and tell us, or tweet us. Always a good way to get my attention. Wave at me at KagroX on Twitter, KAGROX. I don't know how you could not know that at this point, but maybe you're brand new to the show. Welcome. The other alternative, of course, or I would say added instruction, if you're going to tweet, do use the hashtag KITM, Kagro in the morning, in case you were wondering what that stood for. That helps it stay up a little longer on the screen because it puts it in that special column that I dedicate for you and your comments, including, not only just Bill's comment in the morning, but lots of great suggestions for good stories to follow. And we have a lot of great listeners who keep that column populated with the good stories you hear, especially on a day like today, a Friday. Let's catch up with Jason Chaffetz. I had I think I put aside two pieces on him. One I could just use to hit him over the head, I guess. And the other I'll read to you. All right. Politico has, I guess, the latest roundup of the situation. In case you happen to have missed this one, we'll tell you all about it. Mostly it's just for the opportunity to comment on it. Jason Chaffetz threatens to subpoena federal ethics watchdog over Trump criticism. The press world is up in arms. Glenn Thrush, I noticed today, tweeting, can't tell you how many times I heard from, Trump-supporting Republicans that what we really need to do is go after the ethics watchdogs. It is rather remarkable that the House, for instance, started its actions on day one with a rules change where they tried to get rid of the Congressional Ethics Office. And then shortly thereafter, now they're subpoenaing the watchdog. They are waiving all the ethics requirements for ethics filings and background filings and financial filings for the Trump cabinet. I don't know if I've ever seen such a concentrated assault on ethics per se. It's been interesting. Anyway, over at Politico, Darren Samuelson and Josh Gerstein team up on this piece. Chaffetz threatens to subpoena federal ethics watchdog over Trump criticism. It's a little authoritarian, right? Don't you think? House Republicans have found a subject for their opening review of conflicts of interest under Donald Trump. Right? That needs a little bit of probing, and everybody has said, well, no one really trusts the Republican Congress to ride herd on the guy, but maybe they'll keep an eye on him from a distance just to make sure it doesn't get too embarrassing. Well, their first subject of under review in the ongoing saga of Donald Trump's conflicts of interest, the federal official in charge of investigating conflicts of interest. That's the guy they want to examine first. What's wrong with you, ethics watchdog? Representative Jason Chaffetz, the head of the House Oversight Committee, and that is quite an oversight, criticized the director of the Federal Office of Government Ethics on Thursday over his criticism. Oh, see, they're both criticizing. Both sides are criticizing. Why aren't we subpoenaing Jason in this instance? I don't know. He criticized the director over his criticism of Donald Trump's plan to address conflicts of interest. Maybe largely because his plan doesn't address any of the conflicts of interest. And he threatened to subpoena the official, Walter Schaub, if he refuses to participate in an official interview. Which I'm not 100% certain why he would refuse, but I guess it depends on the circumstances of the interview. Like, is it in Guantanamo? Is the door locked? What's happening? He seems to be acting prematurely at best, without doing investigations or thorough looks, Chaffetz said in an interview. Of course, he, being a professional in the field, can probably make a pretty good judgment off the cuff, but whatever. He's rendering public opinions, or opinions publicly, that really cause you to scratch your head, like James Comey. We need the Office of Government Ethics to act ethically. That's a good idea. Ironically, that's not what they're doing. Really? Schaub, an appointee of President Barack Obama, has been a frequent critic of the incoming administration's ethics plans, peaking Wednesday when he called Trump's newly unveiled conflicts of interest policy meaningless. He's right. The public rebuke of Trump's business arrangements came during a press conference at the Brookings Institution that included the outspoken former White House ethics lawyer for Obama and former President George W. Bush. In his remarks, Schaub said the president-elect stepping back from running his positions is meaningless from a conflicts of interest perspective. The plan does not comport with the tradition of our presidents over the last 40 years, he added. Chaffetz and Schaub has refused since the election to agree to a meeting to discuss matters related to the OGE's public remarks about Trump, as well as the Republican-led panel's plans to pass language reauthorizing the office. If Schaub continues to resist, Chaffetz said he'd issue a subpoena, quote, if we have to. You know what would be a great look? Hold him in inherent contempt and put him in the House prison. You should give it a shot. I encourage you to do so. He is coming in. This is not going to be an optional exercise, Chaffetz said, adding that he expected a meeting within a few weeks. Schaub's 5-year term expires in January 2018. By the way, he will not have to use inherent contempt. He can just use actual regular statutory contempt and depend on the Trump Department of Justice to prosecute directly. They won't have any need of using the House's inherent authority in this case. But it would be fun anyway. So, Schaub's 5-year term expires in January of 2018. So, he's got, technically under regular order, I guess, another year left. We need a fair person behind the plate that's going to call balls and strikes, Chaffetz said. What they're supposed to do is help work with somebody to comply with the ethics requirements. But when you talk publicly about private conversations, that's not ethical. And when you refuse to come in and talk to the committee when you're doing reauthorization, when you start tweeting and issuing press statements on things you never looked at, that shouldn't be the case at all. Did he not look at something? He was reacting to the press conference and said what Trump showed the press in his first public remarks on the subject isn't adequate. And obviously no one was able to see the paperwork, so what else are you supposed to look at? I'm not really sure. Earlier Thursday, Chaffetz had praised Trump's newly announced ethics policy, which is ridiculous. President-elect Trump's obligation is to comply with the laws on the books. It appears he is going to great lengths to be as responsible as possible and comply with those requirements, he said in a statement. That, of course, is backwards. On Wednesday, Trump rolled out an ethics policy that places his 2 adult sons and a longtime executive in charge of his company, as well as imposing a prohibition on new international deals and requiring a newly appointed Trump Organization ethics staffer to review any domestic changes in the portfolio. Of course, having a Trump Organization staffer do something with regard to government ethics doesn't tell you a great deal about anything. It wouldn't be out of the ordinary in some other situation, I suppose. I mean, really, continuing to own the business, even transferring it to your sons, which is ridiculous, isn't going to do the trick. But obviously, if there were a government official who was allowed to retain ownership of something, whether a blind trust, an actual blind trust, or some other form of asset, just the fact of having a private compliance officer on your side, making sure that the things that got submitted to the government were on the up and up, that wouldn't be unusual. I guess that would be expected. That would be good practice, I think. My feeling, though, in the way it's described, is that Trump again conflates the personal, the things under his personal control of which he has ownership, and those things with which he has been entrusted, I guess, under our current system, with stewardship of, like the government. He forgets, and blurs the lines there. So in his mind, well, there's a newly appointed Trump Organization ethics staffer. And if the Trump Organization ethics staffer says that this passes the government's ethics test, then it passes the government's ethics test. How do I know this? One, that officer is a total professional. And if they weren't, I would fire them, which I can do because they work for the Trump Organization, right? And 2, I am the government, and so if I have a government or if I have a ethics compliance officer, then the government has one. My ethics compliance officer is the government's ethics compliance officer because I am the government. And if the one I hire and pay through the Trump Organization says that I have met the government's requirements, that's all there is to it. Thank you. And I assume he is actually approaching it that way. It certainly looks that way. Let's see. This isn't Chaffetz's first time challenging Schaub. In late 2015, the Republican accused the Obama appointee of giving Hillary Clinton a pass on conflict of interest laws over speaking fees she and her husband, which they helpfully remind you is former President Bill Clinton, were supposed to disclose. But Chaffetz said he's grown more frustrated with Schaub since the November election and also singled out the OGE's use of its official Twitter account to issue a bizarre series of posts in Trump's own staccato style, congratulating the president-elect for making major changes to his business arrangements, which he didn't. But I do remember this. Those are a little bizarre, weren't they? At the Brookings event Wednesday, Schaub explained why he'd directed a Trump tweet storm at Trump in late November, an unusual series of missives written in a style similar to Trump's own. My thinking was that more pointed language would have been too strong at a point in time where he was still trying to make up his mind, he said. That's interesting. So they called on him. Basically, Chaffetz was looking for him to explain why he used such pointed language. And Schaub's explanation is, I actually didn't use any of the pointed language. I used the less pointed language because it would be inappropriate to really give it to him at that time. A spokesman for the OGE did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The OGE director is also under fire from conservative groups over his criticism of Trump and other administration officials. On Twitter, Judicial Watch chief Tom Fitton said the ethics chief abuses his office per the Obama way. Yeah, sure, okay. And the conservative super PAC America Rising targeted Schaub, filing Freedom of Information Act requests with his office seeking information that they allege may show it is coordinating with Democrats to smear the Trump administration. The American people deserve to know if Walter Schaub has turned the ethics office into an arm of the Senate Democrats' campaign of obstruction, said America Rising's Scott Sloofman, Sloofman. That is a bizarro name, too. All right. I only mention it being bizarre because he's Republican. It's true. Chaffetz, which is also bizarre, his 2015 clash with Schaub, which is not bizarre, grew out of reports in Politico and other news outlets that Hillary Clinton's financial disclosure reports omitted paid speeches given by her husband when the speaking fees were directed to the Clinton Foundation. In some instances, the payments came from foreign government entities. Schaub's office indicated at the time that such omissions could be appropriate if the person involved was speaking on behalf of an organization and not in their individual capacity. However, other ethics experts disagreed and said the honoraria directed to charity should have been reported. Yeah, I guess that might be a close call. I could see that. I understand the rationale. We want you as chairman of the Clinton Global Initiative or Clinton Foundation to come and tell us what the Clinton Foundation or Global Initiative is up to. Okay, I will if you donate money to the Clinton Foundation or Global Initiative. Okay, I did. Now someone else says, I need you to file every time you were paid personally for a speaking engagement and you pocketed the money yourself. All right, here's the list. I noticed the one where you didn't pocket the money isn't on the list. Yes, that's because I didn't pocket the money. Well, some people regard the Clinton Foundation as your pocket. Well, it's not, but okay. I guess we can disclose that too, although we disclose all of those donations in our tax filings. But I see what you're getting at. In light of the fact that Donald Trump has been caught using his foundation as his personal piggy bank, I can understand why people are now suspicious of foundations, and I guess we can disclose it. I get you. Anyway, Chaffetz accused the ethics office of rubber stamping the disclosure forms without investigating their accuracy. You shuffle paperwork. There's no consequence. There's no accountability. There's no review, and there's no investigations. Why do we need you? The Utah Republicans said at the time. Later that month, Chaffetz sent Schaub a detailed demand for documents relating to the ethics office's handling of Clinton's financial disclosures. It's unclear what information the committee received, if any. I wonder if that explains what was going on yesterday afternoon. By the way, a little bit of background noise today. I don't know if it's any of it's coming through over the air, but the gutters are being cleaned, and not by me either. My ladder is not tall enough to reach to the top of our townhouse. We actually have to call somebody else with a bigger ladder. Presumably they arrived here by pickup truck, and that makes me a real American now, because I personally know someone with a pickup truck, the guy cleaning my gutters. I don't know who that is, actually. And I only found out that they were cleaning my gutters when I got a phone call just before airtime from my wife that said, yeah, the guys that I asked if they were free to come and clean the gutters, they said they'd come next week, but then they just called me and said they're on their way over. So make sure the water the hose bib is turned on in the back. That's my big contribution to all this. All right. Let's see. By the way, there are more pickup trucks around than I originally hinted at. I count. I've been looking every day now. I'm conscious of this. There's probably about 9 of them in the neighborhood, and the neighborhood I guess I count as my street, and the ones immediately around the corner. It's a popular thing here. Although I wonder whether real Americans consider our pickup trucks here real American trucks. They have bed liners, and I think that's not real. So, you tell me. If you live somewhere like totally real and stuff, do people have bed liners in their trucks, or is that too fancy? That's a Virginia thing? I don't know. I mean, they got them all over, but it's a little bit weird. This is sort of a dividing line between two cultures. Who knows how many cultures, actually. Have I ever described this one to you? There's a good chance to see the two rural cultures of Virginia come together at the Virginia State Fair. And, if you've been to any state fair, you know that, I don't know any state's fair, I assume. But anyway, horses are a big part of a state fair, typically. They show them, they ride them, they demonstrate all sorts of things. But it's a very weird thing. Virginia has, like northern Virginia, and here I mean the west of northern Virginia. Northern Virginia, Arlington, Alexandria, no horses. Not really. Northern Virginia, western Loudoun County, I guess Clark County, certainly Fauquier County, etc. That's sort of, I guess, still counts as northern Virginia. Anyway, there's horse country going on all over Virginia, of course, but there's 2 different horse cultures in Virginia, and they converge at the state fair in a very weird way. There is the Western style, Western riding, Western saddles, cowboy kind of rancher Virginia. There's, beef, cattle ranching, all kinds of beef and dairy, cattle ranching going on it'd be more like Western and Central Virginia than Northern, although it does stretch up into Northern Virginia. And then there's like actual, honest to God, like steeple chasing, fox hunting, English riding horse culture going on, particularly up this way in Northern Virginia, in Loudoun County, out to the west of me. But maybe you've seen the mention of Loudoun County occasionally in the newspapers as ranking at the top of the what they usually call the wealthiest counties in America. And I guess it's per capita, income per capita, and Loudoun County sits at or near the top and has for quite a while. There's a very strange, I guess we're the strange enclave in Loudoun County. My, relatively middle class and mixed area where all the people who work at the stores that supply the very rich people to the west live. And so it's not entirely evident riding around here that you're in the richest county in America, but you go a little bit west and you run into those people, and then you see them at the state fair. It's very weird, and this strange clash of horse cultures, the two saddle styles, and I don't know if they get along with one another. They all sort of, have a grudging respect for one another's horses, I guess, but it's kind of a weird thing. How did I get to this? I'm not really sure. Anyway, however I got to it, it's time to get off. Oh, yes, the pickup trucks. All right, Culture of Truth, for instance, reminding me or asking me, do pickup artists drive pickup trucks? Yeah, they probably do. They should. If they're, you can see them usually in farmersonly.com commercials. The city slicker guy who says, I need to get me a country girl kind of thing. I don't know exactly why. Maybe because he's in the country. And he says, well, whatever girls they got here are going to want me, I got to get rid of my BMW convertible and my city slicker clothes and dress up like a cowboy. I'll go get me a pickup truck. FarmersOnly.com, I think, explains an awful lot. about what's going on in this country. Okay, so let's see. Moving on from Jason Chaffetz's Pickup Trucks and Horses. It's a great show. I had, what else did I have put aside that I wanted to bring up? Oh, yes. Well, there are a couple of things. Let's see, there's this. Okay, here we go. Wanted to make note of this one. Saw this reported last night. Raw Story picking up on this one, and Sarah Burris writing the story there and tweeting about it. Caught my attention last night. Jeffrey Lord, who we all recall is one of the weirdest goofball Trump surrogates, one of the earliest on board with total sucking up to him, essentially. Well, he made a recent appearance again on TV to defend the conflicts of interest story on behalf of Donald Trump, and he was on with Robert. Does he say Robert Reich? Does he say Reich? Reich? How does he pronounce his name? I don't think I ever got that straight. And I mean, he's been in the public eye for 100 years, but I don't know that I've ever heard anybody else pronounce his name out. I read all the written reports, and I see a lot of his videos, but he never comes on and says, my name is. But what is he? How does he pronounce that? I don't even know. Well, anyway, you will, of course, recognize, him and his name. I'm not going to play. If I play the video for you, it won't do you any good because this is radio. But Reich, yeah, okay. Thanks, Justice. I had a feeling it was like there was a family in my area growing up that had the same spelling, and for some reason they pronounced it as Reach, and it might have been because I don't want to use Reich because Nazis. So, there are various sensitivities to it, but you'll recall he was what was he in the Clinton administration? Secretary of Labor in the Clinton administration. Oh, look, it turns out that he also was in the Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter administrations. I did not know that. The fact that he's 4'11", I didn't know that he was under 5 feet, but he's not a tall guy. That I remember. Anyway, Robert Reich is rendered speechless, which is unusual. He's a verbose guy. Rendered speechless by Jeffrey Lord's claim that Trump is free to flout ethics because he won. I just wanted to share this one with you in case you didn't see it, just to remind you of exactly where we are in all this. Where is this leaving us? Robert Reich, or as Justice typed it to me, what did you say? R-I-E-Y-E, like R-I-K. Reich. This is what I guess that's supposed to mean. He certainly doesn't walk around saying R-I-K, right? Robert Reich doesn't understand why Donald Trump isn't going out of his way to reassure Americans that there are no conflicts of interest in his business and political dealings. Well, he is. He's just not doing it correctly. He's going out of his way by lying, saying, well, maybe that's not really out of his way, saying, I can't have conflicts of interest. But even if you think I can, I don't. Because these papers. In a Thursday appearance on AC 360, Reich said that lawyers all differ on what is required by the president to absolve himself of such interests. In the past, many presidents have stepped away from their businesses, and there's no reason Trump can't in this case. This is total disdain for the democratic institutions of government and total disdain for public trust, Reich said. The idea that he is not going to talk to his sons is clearly and patently absurd. Reich cited Ben Carson's confirmation hearing for the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development position, in which Carson admitted he couldn't assure anyone of anything at all. He couldn't assure anyone. This is a totally separate story, but great citation here by Reich. He couldn't assure anyone that he wouldn't use government money to help benefit Trump's finances. Do they explain that in here? I guess not. But my assumption is for one thing, I know that Donald Trump owns lots of units, mostly housing units, built by his father, mostly. Back in the days when they produced housing for schlubs instead of housing for high roller Russian mobsters covered in gold spray paint. So there's lots of middle and low income housing. The low income housing, of course, would likely be subject to would be under the Section 8 subsidy portfolio of the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Lower income residents would get rent subsidies, or rather, the owners of the units get rent subsidies so that low-income folks can afford the housing. And so there's direct government payments through HUD to the owners of the units. That'll be Donald Trump and the Trump Organization. So the question is, will government dollars, will taxpayer dollars be poured into the coffers of HUD and then be drained out of the coffers of HUD and into the pockets of Donald Trump? The answer is yes. And I guess Ben Carson either didn't want to say so or didn't know because he has no idea about how HUD works, I don't think. But in either case, he was not particularly interested in saying that would be happening. So instead he said, I don't know. Reich pointed to that yesterday, and then conservative Trump surrogate Jeffrey Lord countered that the American people have already given the president-elect their vote of confidence and don't need any further explanations. This has been litigated, Lord said. It hasn't, of course. All these things were out there for the American public to see. They could have rejected Donald Trump. They did not. So that's been decided by the American people. It's over. Of course, the American people voted overwhelmingly for Hillary Clinton, but the Electoral College, I guess, has decided it for the American people, and it's over. And he's correct in the sense that there will not be anyone in authority anywhere who will be able to physically stop that money from flowing to Donald Trump or be able to throw him physically out of office to strip him of his authority because of his violations of ethics rules and the Constitution. So in the sense that what are you going to do about it obtains, he's absolutely correct. There has been the accountability moment. This is how they'll justify anything. Did he just steal that money? Yeah, he did, but you knew when you voted for him, which you didn't, by about a margin of almost $3 million, that he was a thief. And the fact that you decided to cast your ballot for the thief anyway indicates to me that you are pro-thievery and or have defined what he's doing with the money as not thievery. It's a novel theory. Robert doesn't think so. He says this is a crazy set of arguments. And he said, while Lord laughed at him, because Lord knows that it is/isn't crazy. Donald Trump came into government saying that he was going to drain the swamp. One of the reasons he was elected is so many are concerned about all this money in politics, all this money in Washington. That was this anti-establishment fervor that said effectively, we don't want the status quo, we don't want politics as usual, we don't want big money in politics. That's what he was elected for, says Reich. Of course, you and I know better because we heard from Armando yesterday that he was actually elected for racism. So, maybe we disagree, right? Anyway, Lord maintained that Trump's declaration to drain the swamp had to do with Washington, D.C. culture, lobbyists, and the consultant class, who he then hired to fill his cabinet. A big part of the culture of Washington has been conflicts of interest that are skating the letter of the law, Reich explained. Maybe they observe the letter of the law, but not the spirit. There are ethical problems. Donald Trump is creating an ethically challenged administration even before he begins. One other thing, I was amazed that at the press conference yesterday, he says, oh, well, the public doesn't care. How does he know that? And Lord answers him, because he's the president-elect of the United States. That's how, Lord proclaimed. Reich seemed dumbfounded. Just because you're the president-elect, a lot of people held their noses and voted for Donald Trump, Reich explained. It doesn't mean he has legitimacy, that he can say to and regard all of the institutions of democracy as his playthings from now on. Being president doesn't give you a license to undermine the integrity of your government. Lord, though, thinks maybe it does. Lord dismissed it, claiming that this is just another liberal argument that they'll push out for the next several years. But the American people made their decision. It's over. Get on with it, Lord said. And you can, in fact, watch the exchange on video at Raw Story. And I guess I'll encourage you to do so, despite the fact that it will only destroy your confidence in our ability to continue as a civilization. But if you really want to see it, go ahead and take a look. All right. Oh, let's see. What have we been sent here? Chris Fry has sent us something complete with the KITM hashtag. A new law that could cripple the federal government. He who owns the gavel makes the rules. Okay, well, that sounds familiar enough. Let's take a look and see what that is all about. Let's see. Oh, we're being taken over to Talking Points Memo. It's a little internets are a little slow today. Here comes Armando to tell us that Jeffrey Lord is right, probably. Hey, good morning, Armando. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good. I'm sorry to jump in.
No problem.
One of the things, I was listening to your Lord take, and I don't know why we're arguing with people who
we're noting
impervious to facts, logic, and everything, but as long as we're doing it.
Yes.
Simple question. Who said crooked Hillary?
That would be Donald Trump.
Who said the foundation, Clinton Foundation, was crooked and corrupt?
He did that too.
So what are we saying? He only ran against crookedness by Hillary, and he basically said, "Don't vote for her crookedness, vote for mine." Is that the argument that the board is supporting here?
Yes, except for the part about his being crooked. Yeah, it's not crookedness. I mean, if you really pushed him on it, what he would say is the American people decided that what she was doing was crooked and that what he is doing and will be doing is not.
Well, he hadn't done it yet.
Yes, but the American people are super smart. And they could tell what he was going to do, and they were okay with it. Yeah, I mean, it's garbage, obviously, but it actually elevates and goes beyond it's not illegal if the president does it. And it's not only not illegal, it's like affirmatively legal and has been pre-approved. I've got pre-clearance by the American people. The accountability moments work in two ways with these guys. If you win re-election, it whitewashes everything you did since your last one. But since he's never been elected before, the new one is, well, he got elected, so whatever he does now is okay, because he just asked the American people, are you cool with my doing things? Yes. All right. Great. I'm going to do that. And some of it is going to be murder. That is all right. It is now defined as non-murder because I liked your idea about the wall or whatever. I mean, it's one of those problems we always have in trying to figure out what the hell does a vote mean. But Jeffrey Lord solves it. It means whatever you need it to mean. He's
whatever you need it to mean. So I get,
so
when Bill Clinton won in 1993, there should never have been a continuation of the Whitewater investigation.
Right.
Travelgate should never have been a thing.
Yes. The American people gave Monica Lewinsky permission.
Right. Why couldn't he just, do what he did with Monica Lewinsky?
I don't know. I mean, is there anybody who in 1996 didn't know about Bill Clinton and his
1996, 1992, they called him Slick Willie.
Yeah, exactly. Jennifer Flowers, etc. We knew what we were getting into, so we really, honestly, the fact that there were women at the White House who had clothes on at all is unexpected, obviously.
Exactly. Bill Clinton should have just been walking around naked in the White House based on this theory, and there would have been no problem.
Right. Except no, because Democrat. Yeah, I mean, it's the worst kind of garbage in the world. Jeffrey Lord is the worst kind of garbage in the world. He's disgusting. Period.
Yeah, I'll go, again, logic and facts and reason are no longer matter. Nothing matters.
It's just toys to play
But
with.
the emoluments clauses, which we've talked about and which I'll be writing about, and the Constitution, elections don't overturn the Constitution.
Yes. It isn't?
Even an election where you got 3 million less votes than the other person.
Yes.
Those don't overturn the Constitution.
Sure they do. Unless they don't, in which case, that's fine. I mean, they do. They overturn everything in the emoluments clause is gone. The American people said it would be okay for him to violate the Constitution. But remember, yes, he got 3 million votes less, but he's president because Constitution. Same Constitution, I think, yes?
Yeah.
It's all bound together in my little pocket copy, which is worthless now.
The pocket. Here's my copy.
Yeah, I love that. That's always my
Well,
favorite.
you can burn that copy now. It's meaningless, apparently.
Yes, it is okay to do. And it's not unconstitutional to burn the Constitution, as far as I can tell. Doesn't say it anywhere. And you know how that goes. Although there is a little flag motif on it. That might be illegal to burn. But not unconstitutional at this point. Yeah, well, I mean, this is the worst kind of everything in the world.
It really is.
And it's very upsetting.
I mean, well, what are we left to argue about? I mean, at this point, there's nothing to talk about. It's just resist them every way you can.
Yeah.
I mean, resist them every way you can. There's no reasoning. There's no arguments.
Mm-hmm.
You just fight them, and whatever weapons you have. Of course, they can eliminate them all because they have the majority. But until they do,
Yep.
you just fight them.
Well,
I hope there's another election.
Yeah, we're late in coming to that conclusion. A lot of our friends, and many of them never will actually come to that conclusion. But it actually played a large part in my interest in the scheming things like, hey, wonder if we can get Joe Biden to slow things down on January 3rd and just install Merrick Garland at the Supreme Court with a temporary majority, and that offended a lot of people's sense of everything, and with good reason. It's completely counter to everything.
Wrong, but
I
we're
said,
beyond wrong.
yeah,
Now.
I'm like, look, man, this is just try anything era. Look what they're saying. It's not illegal if the president does it. There's no such thing as a conflict of interest for the president. I didn't do that. I did have a briefing. I didn't have a briefing. You know.
I will say, Lord has one point that you have to accept, and I've said this. I said it this morning on Twitter. You know, it's not like Trump's craziness, crookedness, unfitness was a secret. And they voted for him. The white working class of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, or whoever else they voted for him. There is no reasoning with these people. This is what I don't get. What are we supposed to, what are we supposed to say? They know what he is, and they said, we want that.
Yeah. For other reasons, perhaps, but.
Yeah. Oh, clearly for other reasons, but they're fine with the crookedness. They never cared about corruption in Washington. This is all nonsense.
Corruption is when the other guys take the money, and when my guy takes it, that makes him smart.
They're your adversaries too, is what I'm saying. We need to get there's a disconnect that Trump is just on an island. No, yes, he lost, but he had 62 million votes.
Yeah,
there's 62 million people that went to the election to the booth and voted for him.
Yes,
that's insane.
Yep. Well, we heard a little bit from them. I mean, we hear from them all the time. It's like the favorite hobby of of journalists now is explaining why we should be sympathetic with that.
I'm
last
not.
Night.
And I'm not. And I've said
we hit on it yesterday.
Not anymore.
Okay. Well, I don't blame you, and there's very little reason to do that. Although, and I mean, you could try. All right, you know what? I'll accept your logic, and let me try and work with it. Maybe mine is in need of recalibration. I don't remember where I saw this yesterday. Somebody was tweeting around a clip from one, peon to the rural white working class or another that. Maybe I'll stumble on it even in Pocket. But the clip that I saw, the screenshot I saw, was an interview with a retired farmer from somewhere in the Midwest.
That one.
Yeah.
I was thinking of that right now.
Okay, maybe if you have that one handy, we can provide
I don't,
it,
but I remember what you tweeted.
Yeah.
He basically, the retired farmer said, he doesn't trust anybody, but he's happy that Trump is putting a bunch of billionaires in there because, sure, they're crooked, but, if they use their crookedness for us, because that's what they're going to do, right?
Yeah.
Then we'll all be good because they'll be doing it for us, not
and
for
they're
themselves.
Smart.
Because,
they know what they're doing.
Because that's how corruption works. They work for you.
Yes, they'll get corrupt on the other people on your behalf. And he went right ahead and said, well, those guys, I mean, sure, they're all billionaires, but you have to be pretty smart to be a billionaire.
No, they were smart thieves.
Right. You have to be smart to be a billionaire, which, all right. Suspending disbelief. I'm trying to sympathize with you. Your logic here. They have to be pretty smart to be billionaires, so it's going to be okay, says retired farmer. So initially, you have to start wondering, well, okay, if being a billionaire is what makes you smart, then being a retired farmer makes you, let's say, what?
Dumb.
And
so
he
proved it.
I said, well, I can't do that. Clearly something's wrong here because I say what he says and it comes out all wrong and I'm disrespecting the rural white working class again. Geez, it's almost like heads I win, tails you lose on this thing. I don't, if I tell you your logic is ridiculous and reject it, that's being condescending. If I say, I might be wrong, let me try your logic, I come to the conclusion that you shouldn't be giving anybody advice on how to run a government. Oh, dang. I guess I should just shut up and either sign up for farmersonly.com or I don't know what, sell oxycodone pills or make meth or something. I don't know what else to do. Many fine people. I can just get a pickup truck. I can stay clean and drive around and Uber people around in pickup trucks. That I can do, maybe. I don't know. There's just it's very difficult to come up with a reason to respect a position. Of course, there's many other ones out there, and I'm sure there are lots of farmer philosophers out there who say, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Are you kidding me? But I don't know why none of the wandering journalists have found those guys yet. But soon enough, they'll comb one out for us. I'm a little annoyed by that, and I didn't put that article aside.
We're screwed.
Yeah,
we're screwed. We got.
Well, the only thing I can think of is maybe my money won't be stolen. Maybe we'll make it, right? That's it. If I'm not picked up off the street,
maybe he'll forget to steal our money.
Yeah. I really don't know. And as they close rural hospitals and people find out that farmersonly.com doesn't help with that or, or they're bankrupt again or, gosh, I lost my farm or my kids are still on meth and there's nothing I can do about it and I can't afford any of my medicines. And also, by the way, every form of illness I have is now immune to antibiotics. So that's not his fault. Yeah, I don't know. I'll just cross my fingers and hope that their pathogens don't reach me. And that's it.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. They're farming my food. I don't know how I'm going to live.
I may have to, I don't know. Changing gears, on the resistance side, I tweeted at you with the story by our old colleague, Van Newkirk.
Okay.
It's about the reconciliation, the Affordable Care Act.
Oh, yes.
And remember yesterday I asked you about, how can you apply reconciliation to a deficit increasing bill? Mm-hmm. Because it was this whole issue. And he had reported that to use the Byrd rule, it can only work with CBO scored legislation.
Yeah.
Is that your understanding? Because we talked about that yesterday.
Very likely the case, yeah. I don't know if I recall all of the intricacies of the Byrd rule, but I imagine that's where the...
Van says that, and Van's very reliable, as you know, that it's his understanding that the Byrd rule, the Budget Act of 74, I believe it was, said you can used reconciliation with the 20-hour rule and all that stuff for only for CBO scored revenue neutral legislation, right?
Yeah, that sounds likely.
Well, then, Affordable Care Act repeal wouldn't qualify for reconciliation based on previous CBO scoring, because the score when it was passed had a $350 billion deficit reduction component.
Yes,
because of the taxes in it. So the question becomes, at least in my mind, what do they do? Where do they find this $350 billion? Well, I assume they'll just leave some of the taxes in and eliminate the expenditures. I'm not, I think this is a lot more complicated than I think people are realizing when we talk about, and rightly so, the political tactic of saying you're going to take away 20 million, the health insurance of 20 million Americans. I get that, but there's also trying to understand the mechanics of how this works as well, because it's really going to. I think there's going to be parliamentarian rulings for sure, right?
Yes. And I mean, the majority party has the luxury, and the minority too, in some extent, of seeking advisory rulings ahead of time. So I mean, they'll have the opportunity to check. But they're not going to just have to show up on the floor and say, "What do you think, parliamentarian?" So
all right,
they'll have.
So you think that they'll run it by them first, so that when a Democrat raises the objection that this violates the Byrd rule, that they'll have the parliamentarian lined up.
They'll either have the parliamentarian. Well, I assume what they'll attempt to be doing is engineer a rule or a reconciliation package that passes muster with the parliamentarian. If need be, I mean, if they just can't develop it that way. Oh, looks like I wonder if I could. You know what? Hang on a second.
I'll talk while you answer that door.
And I'll try to look things up too. Okay, thanks. Hold on.
Yeah, I mean, here's the way I see it. And when David comes back, he knows all these tactics and procedures as well as anybody. Is suppose the legislation is basically just a repeal of all the budgetary items of the Affordable Care Act. That means all the expenditures and all the tax revenue. Well, based on previous CBO scoring, that would lead to increasing the deficit over a 10-year span up by $350 billion, maybe more now, because as I recall, the Affordable Care Act did even better than scored because so many states, Republican states, rejected the Medicaid expansion. So I think the number's probably closer to $500 billion. So as it stands now, the scoring of a repeal of Affordable Care Act in toto would balloon the deficit by $550 billion. Now, you can care or not care about the deficit, but the Byrd rule cares. The reconciliation rule cares because it has to be, I'm told, the CBO scored deficit revenue neutral.
Yes, the gutter cleaning guys care, by the way, as it turns out. They were supposed to do all this
work
without,
at the White House coming up after January 20th.
They can clean the place up. I felt bad about it. The guy, he was ringing the doorbell. Hey, I want to get paid. I said, my wife called you and hired you on the whole deal was that you wouldn't ring my doorbell in the middle of this thing and then we'd pay you by credit card after. All right. So, you don't want to tell people you can't get paid, but, I didn't, if I had known, I would have said, all right, I'll have some cash here for you. I don't. All right, but anyway,
there you go.
Anyway, so the reconciliation law.
Well, he knows where you live, so
yeah, right. I know. I feel bad, but you'll get paid. Hopefully, you get paid a little extra when it is done by credit. Who knows? Anyway, yes. They're going to have to engineer this thing up, and it may just be that I don't even know that they necessarily need to use reconciliation to do what they want to do. They might find in the end, after a fight with the parliamentarian, that so little of what they wanted to do can fit in reconciliation anyway, unless they just waive the rules or overturn the decision of the parliamentarian, which they can do with a simple majority. They may just have said, why not just push it through under regular order?
That's interesting. Can I ask you a question? Because the Byrd Rule is a law. It's not a rule. If they violate the Byrd Law, who has standing, you think, to challenge?
I think in the way that they do it, nobody. The Byrd Rule exists in
It's interesting
places,
you say that.
because it's not. I mean, the Byrd Rule is, how do I even describe it? The Budget Act is the statutory authority to use the reconciliation process and a number of other things. I mean, it establishes the whole budget process, requiring a budget resolution from the Congress, and sets up different accounts to which money can be authorized and then later appropriated, etc. But then it also established the reconciliation process and protected both budget resolution and reconciliation from the filibuster by capping the amount of time that you could spend debating it. But the rules about how it's used exist in the Senate rules and not statute.
Okay.
So
maybe I should read that law before I start talking about it.
Well, that's always a good idea. But you start that conversation here. That's all right. You're not in court here. You're just having a backroom conversation. So it's in the boardroom. We're all talking about what we need to research.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure that what we're really talking about in terms of what qualifies under reconciliation is a matter of Senate rules rather than statute. And you'd find a real gray area if it were enshrined in statute. And I'm not even positive that it's not, but you'd have a real hard time constitutionally with the idea that the Senate of 1974 can bind the Senate of 2017 on matters of procedure.
I've always thought that, and I've always think that about the Byrd Rule. I mean, suppose it is in the law. I mean, then all they need to do is pass a law to repeal it.
Yes, that's true too. But yeah,
would that be subject to reconciliation?
I can't think of any reason why that would be allowed under reconciliation.
It's budgetary argument.
Yeah, I mean, but you wouldn't be able to score it because you wouldn't know what was at stake. All future votes on the budget, yes, but how much is that worth? I don't know. That's legislating. That's a pure legislative issue, and it wouldn't ordinarily qualify under the Byrd Rule for including reconciliation.
I mean, I'm just asking.
But nothing does. I mean, the example you brought up the other day of the Bush tax cuts, wherein Cheney
2003,
cast the tie-breaking vote. That was a vote on a reconciliation bill that the parliamentarian had ruled was ineligible under the Byrd Rule, and they or was prepared to rule that, and they fired him and replaced the parliamentarian with one who said no, it's fine. But you know what's funny?
Remember in that rule that they on that piece of legislation that they did some chicanery where they basically had
they used a 10-year scoring window.
And they put like 1 year where it was 100% estate tax or something. It was ridiculous. Obviously, they weren't going to let it happen.
Yes, things like that. And they sunsetted the tax cuts. You'll recall this. This will bring back your memories for people who weren't necessarily steeped in this stuff. You'll remember the votes at the end, toward the end of the Bush administration, to make the tax cuts permanent. Remember that whole thing? We're going to codify the tax cuts and make them permanent. They were limited to, I forget what number of years, whether it was 10 on the nose or whether they did 9 to squeeze it in under reconciliation. the tax cuts sunsetted and the tax rates reverted to the pre-cut levels at a certain point, which they did in order to keep the cost of them below a certain level so that they could squeeze it in under reconciliation. Exactly. There we go.
And they expired in 2010, and then there was a lame duck in Obama. And then remember Biden came in and gave away the store in the negotiations, and Reid got mad at him, rightly so. I mean, Biden's a terrible negotiator. I think Biden to negotiate anything was crazy, but be that as it may. The story here was at least, look, say what you will, at least they pretended to try to follow the Byrd rule back then.
Sort of, yeah. I'm just calling up, by the way, the Wikipedia, which is sometimes reliable, sometimes not. So it's always questionable. The Wikipedia entry, I bring it up because it's quick and easy to read on the air. It says the Byrd rule is a Senate rule that amends the Congressional Budget Act of 1974. How you can do that, I'm not sure.
Well, you can stop that right. Yeah, just stop right there. It's inaccurate.
Yeah.
A rule can't amend a law.
But what I would say, probably a better phrasing of it, the Byrd rule is a Senate rule that
enables.
Enables under which the Congressional Budget Act is executed in the Senate, which allows senators during the reconciliation process to block a piece of legislation if it purports to significantly increase the federal deficit beyond a 10-year term. There you are. Or is otherwise an extraneous matter as set forth in the Budget Act. So, reconciliation itself generally involves legislation that changes the budget deficit or conceivably a surplus. The Byrd rule was adopted in 1985 and amended in 1990 to outline which provisions reconciliation can and cannot be used for. The Byrd rule defines a provision to be extraneous and therefore ineligible for reconciliation in 6 cases. Those cases being: 1, if it does not produce a change in outlays or revenues. 2, if it produces only an outlay increase or revenue decrease when the instructed committee is not in compliance with its instructions. Do you want to make a comment there before?
Yeah, I do. What do you mean if it doesn't comply with its instructions? What if I instruct you to allow that?
Yeah, well, that's a problem. We'll see whether any of the other 6 address that, I guess. The third one is if it is outside the jurisdiction of the committee that submitted the title or provision for inclusion in the reconciliation measure. I don't know if that's ever come up. 4 is if it produces a change in outlays or revenues, which is merely incidental to the non-budgetary components of the provision. This is, for most people, probably gobbledygook, but number 5, if it would increase the deficit for a fiscal year beyond those covered by the reconciliation measure, though the provisions in question may receive an exception if they are in total in a title of the measure net to a reduction in the deficit. Ooh.
What?
And that's a tough one. We'll have to go over that one again. And or number 6 is a big one. If it recommends changes to Social Security, that's something people knew about it the last time we used it, but worth reminding everybody. If it changes Social Security, because that was huge for Byrd, it's not allowed in reconciliation.
It's not allowed. Then it's a 60.
Yeah. The 5th one.
Yeah,
is
that's
bizarre.
why. I don't think they're going to go after Social Security.
No, I just
myself. It's hard. And it's very unpopular.
Yeah. It might come up again when they use reconciliation. They do the Obamacare repeal through it, and then next year Donald Trump says, you know what sucks? Social Security. We should privatize it. First of all, we should give it all to me. I'll take care of the cash and make sure you're all taken care of when you're old. Let's erase that. Well, we can't. It'll be filibustered. Well, put it in reconciliation. And everyone will say, yeah, reconciliation. You'll say, no, that's the 6th case. And they'll say, you're crazy. Fake news, they'll say to you. Anyway.
I think they're not going to do anything on Social Security.
I know.
Now.
That is not on the table at the moment.
Look, when Social Security gets cut is when everybody decides, let's do it together and I'll take the blame together. That's what Ronald Reagan did. And any other times, it's always been, all right, well, no one's going to attack anybody on this. Mm-hmm. And they sort of live by it. I mean, nobody's actually attacked each other on the different Social Security fixes they've done in the past. There's general attacks from one side or the other, but whenever they've actually wanted to do something, they all sort of just mute themselves and don't attack each other on Social Security. So I just don't see Social Security being a thing.
No. Now I'm reminded also, just by skimming down here, by the way, that technically the rules would require 60 votes to overturn a ruling of the parliamentarian. The way around that, of course, is it requires 51 to replace the parliamentarian. So
let's get the guy who gives us the ruling we want.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the Jeffrey Lord version of the rule is, sure, it takes 60 votes to overturn the parliamentarian, but that assumes that he's still the parliamentarian by the time you take the vote. How about if I instead, by 51, install a new parliamentarian who doesn't give me that headache? I've elected this parliamentarian because I am approving of his understanding of reconciliation differently than the former guy. We knew what we were getting when we voted for him. What can I tell you? So
I mean, I mean, this will sound weird, but it is interesting and a little bit hopeful because there's still a lot of checks in legislation here as long as the filibuster survives. But still, the bird rule has to be eliminated, too, to do a lot of the harm they want to do. Now, the filibuster on legislation in the Supreme Court is what's left, right?
Yes.
And as of today, no one has said they're going to try to knock it out.
No.
And I don't know. On the Supreme Court stuff, it's a dead letter anyway. Nobody filibusters the Supreme Court nominees. If they fail, it's because they won't have 50 votes, which doesn't seem likely at this point. But I don't think that filibuster has that much to do with Supreme Court part of it anyway. The Abe Fortas precedent. And if I recall correctly, I don't think there was a vote of filibuster per se. It was just they weren't going to let him take the Chief Justice's chair.
The nomination for long enough for whispers about his issues to bubble up and have him say, I don't really want to cause these problems. I'm leaving. I'm just not taking it. So, I
think that's but the legislative part, I don't know. I do think that's a little bit harder to get through. Of course, the vote just required 50 plus a tiebreaker to change that rule. We've always thought that, and I'm not going to pretend now that the Senate doesn't control its own rules by majority vote. Of course it does. Right?
Right.
I mean, that's the reality, and I think that's right. I mean, there's nothing in remember when there was these discussions about the constitutional option and the nuclear option? And, of course, the constitutional option was absolutely rooted to judicial appointments. The argument was. They said it's okay for everything else, but not judicial appointments. And there's nothing in the Constitution that actually says that. But they talked about interestingly enough, that the Senate has its advice and consent obligation, which, of course, they forgot all about that argument during the long year of Merrick Garland's pending nomination. Mm-hmm. Apparently, the advice and consent constitutional obligation didn't apply there.
Well, they are always very selective.
Yes, I know. Well, so, and I'm being that this time. I'm all for federalism now.
Okay. Well,
I've become quite the federalist.
Adapt to the situation as needed, I guess. And, yes.
I think it's wrong. I don't think that's congruent with the constitutional vision. I mean, I'm not going to sit here. I'm not going to lie to you and say, I really believe federalism is what was intended in the Constitution, because I don't. But I'll use it. I
guess so. I mean, yeah. I don't. I can't disagree. I certainly can't tell you I'm doing anything different. So,
Well, I mean, I don't know. You've been pretty consistent.
I try. I mean, it's nice if you can be,
You're
but
much more consistent than I am.
look,
I'll
you get
give
handed
you that.
situations and kill me. I want to win.
No, I mean,
know?
I don't say it as.
Right.
I mean, it's to your credit. You're building arguments that are consistent with your views on procedure and governance, and to your credit, you construct very good ones. I sort of cut to the chase and just cut to the argument that works for me.
Well, that, like you say, you're doing your job.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we do. I mean, it is a profession thing, I guess, as well. That you never actually, or haven't in a long time, done the whole lawyer thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality of what's ahead is pretty daunting.
Yes.
But we have to fight it. And listen, we got to get through. I'll go through my timetable again. 17, you got to fight. 18, you got to run. And if you can, knock out the Republican majorities in one of the houses.
Yes.
I don't know if we have great chances in it. I know we're defending a lot of seats in 18, but I think that's not the smart way to look at this. I do think we're sort of in a sui generis situation with Trump here. I don't think that the old rules of what you to expect in midterms is going to be quite as binding. Of course, in theory, the presidents have always, except after 9/11, I think was the only time in recent history where the president's party lost seats in both houses of Congress. In the first midterm, there's always been losses, and in the second midterm, sometimes even deeper losses. But the first order of business is try to get control of one of these houses, of Congress, so that we can stop them.
Yep. Well, we'll see whether that's in the offing.
I mean, I honestly do think in some respects, when you talk about, if saying you want to work with him, with Trump, helps you stop him in 2018, fine. I'm not convinced that's a strategy that works. I think it's going to actually backfire. You don't want to normalize him. You want to basically stop him and not help him in any way. So in that sense, I disagree with the arguments of agreeing with him when you agree with him and disagreeing with him when you disagree with him. The disagreements are so profound, so important that any minor agreements that you think are worthwhile simply aren't, because you're going to give credibility to the things you disagree with him on. And to him in general. I think that stopping him gaining any credit has to be. Look, I know Mitch McConnell was excoriated by Democrats when he said that their first order of business is stopping Obama and hurting Obama. And personally, I wasn't offended by it at the time, so I'm being consistent here. Why should he help Obama? He's against what Obama's for. There's really this notion of, well, we should work together. No, we disagree with you. I want to stop you. I want to keep you from doing what you think you want to do, or what you're saying you want to do. So I think that's really at the heart of this argument. Unless it's politically helpful in 2018 to pretend to try to work with him, and I don't think it is, then there's no reason to even be doing that.
No, I certainly don't. I mean, personally, no, I don't. I don't want to see it, but I assume someone will make that argument somewhere. Whether they'll succeed with it or not, I don't know. I guess I'm certain that you could show me a
real money as opposed to, you know what I mean? $100 billion infrastructure bill isn't worth the rest of it.
No.
There's not, and of course that's not even the infrastructure bill. It's tax credit giveaway to private companies. So even if you were inclined, he's giving you no reason to work with it. But even if he did, I still think it would be a bad idea.
Yeah. Well, I got another couple of stories to add to the, this isn't the government you thought you were dealing with. pile.
Yeah, you know
here.
what? I'm going to let you go. Hopefully Josie calls in, and
Yes.
I'll just listen in. And if
Okay.
I get too enraged, maybe I'll call you again. Probably not.
It's you're free to do. Okay.
All
Very good.
right,
Thanks,
dude. Take
Armando.
care.
Take care. Have a good weekend. I will return to the storyline of weird rules changes and attacks on ethics and attacks on or undermining of the normal functions of government by returning to the article that Chris Fry sent to us. By the way, if you would like to follow along with Chris's comments on Twitter, you'll find him at Semper Curiosa. I do believe we've called his name on the show before, but you get it, Semper, right? Semper Curiosa, always curious, right? Or ever curious. What would be the better translation? Okay, I don't know. I'm not great with the Latin. Well, he sent us to this talking points memo piece by John Judas, a new law that would cripple the federal government. Now, we don't want that, typically, the crippling of the federal government, although I suppose if it really goes, when push really comes to shove, and the federal government is a creature of Donald Trump, maybe we'll want it crippled. I don't know. We're such hypocrites. Gosh, I can't take it. Okay. John Judas tells us this. Sometimes the general public is completely unaware of very important decisions government makes because they are shrouded in technicalities. It's every goddamn day. Which brings me to my own favorite pet argument about transparency. That transparency isn't a data problem per se, although that's where all the money goes to turning it into well, let's make the data available. We'll free it up and we'll use the magic of the internet to give the information to everybody. I could give you the information, the raw information all day long. That's one of the problems with like raw intelligence, right? It's interpretation that makes it make sense. I say to you, transparency tells me, for instance, that the Senate next week would like very much, the Senate under, when I say the Senate, I mean Mitch McConnell, would like very much to vote next week on H.R. 72. It's as transparent as it gets. That's what he asked for. I'm telling you what he did yesterday. He asked for unanimous consent to call a vote at 4:15 on Tuesday on H.R. 72. So, there you go. Transparency. Go run with it. Oh, what's H.R. 72? Well, I'll tell you. And I could give you the title of the bill, and the title of the bill will mean nothing to you, by the way. You'll have to know something about what it does and why it's important, and realize the fact that, gee whiz, that's weird, that H.R. 72, that as it happens, the bill, by the way, just a total tangent, but just to kind of explain the transparency thing, the bill apparently authorizes the federal government, or in fact, specifically the Government Accountability Office, used to be called the General Accounting Office, but the Government Accountability Office would be authorized to sue other federal agencies if they do not comply with requests for documents and other records that the GAO says it needs to complete its compliance reviews of the various functions of government. I guess this goes back to, I guess the next question is, okay, that's all understandable, but surely that's not the whole story. Why would Republicans be so interested in the Government Accountability Office being able to sue other federal agencies, which seems like a tremendous waste of money at the outset? Why would Republicans be so interested in that they would make it the next order of business after the budget resolution to set up the repeal of Obamacare? Why would that be the very next vote? There must be something else going on here. You see that, in other words, the picture on transparency and government, understanding what government is doing goes way beyond just getting the raw data on what's going on or hearing what they hear on the floor. In other words, it's shrouded in technicalities. That's where I was going with all this. That's where John left us in his article. Yesterday, he says, the House of Representatives passed a bill that could cripple the ability of government to regulate private industry. That doesn't sound good at all, right? The bill modifies the Administrative Procedure Act, which was passed in 1946 and represented a compromise between New Deal Democrats and free market Republicans. It sanctioned the power of government agencies like the National Labor Relations Board or the Federal Communications Commission to regulate the private market, but required public hearings on proposed rulings and court suits to overturn regulations. The Supreme Court ruled in 1984 that the courts could only overturn rulings that were arbitrary and capricious. You've heard me use the terminology before. And abuse of discretion. In other words, the courts would have to defer to the regulatory agencies in finding whether a ruling was justified. But the Republicans in the House passed a law that would allow the courts to rule without giving deference to the regulatory agencies. A Republican court could, for instance, overrule decisions of the Food and Drug Administration or the Environmental Protection Agency on concocted constitutional grounds, say by arguing that it violated the takings clause of the Constitution. That could cripple the regulatory agencies. Martin Lobel, a Washington lawyer and expert in tax and regulatory policy, sent me an email explaining the Republican action. On January 11th, while everyone's attention was focused on confirmation hearings and attempts to repeal Obamacare, the House passed the Regulatory Accountability Act of 2017, which would amend the Administrative Procedures Act to overturn the deference courts have given to administrative agency decisions by a vote of 238 to 183. I was told the Republican leadership was confident, since there are 114 judicial vacancies that they expect will be filled by, quote, conservatives. This change will significantly help to end, quote, big government, as will the new administration's appointees to the various regulatory bodies. Beware. Marty's admonition, beware, should be taken very seriously. If the Senate passes this act and then President Trump signs it, federal agencies entrusted with enforcing the Clean Air Act and other landmark legislation will no longer be able to do their jobs. Very important that that be on the record and you know about it. That makes you smarter for the weekend. There's not anything you can do about it. We're doomed. But at least you'll see it coming. Thanks to Chris for sending us that one and letting us know. There's more, of course. I had another piece set aside earlier in Pocket that would tip us to yet another rules change. I love it. We have a collection of stories that say, you don't know about this. Well, everybody was distracted by XYZ. This happened. And but they are. That was by design. They're flooding the zone, as they say. But it is kind of funny. There's 10 people reminding me of what really happened while everyone was distracted by this. You weren't distracted by it, but you missed this other thing. Like, okay, this person, Ashley Balzarak, has written for OpenSecrets.org, a House rules change you didn't hear much about and prosecutors won't like. Now, that was all true, and we didn't hear much about it, but that's because I was paying attention to the change in the Administrative Procedures Act with John Judas and Marty, what's his name? And I was busy. I wasn't paying attention to that one either. Okay, what is this one? The Office of Congressional Ethics, you'll recall, was saved from the landfill where House Republicans had tried to bury it by public outcry and a couple of tweets from President-elect Donald Trump. That's just being nice. But few noticed a sentence that did make it into the package of House rules changes passed on Tuesday, making it more difficult to access documents having to do with the operations of lawmakers' offices. Records, and I'll give you an idea about what we're talking about here. The piece is illustrated with a photo of former Representative Aaron Schock, who gave us all such a thrill watching him collapse in the last Congress, right here in the show. So what are we talking about? Records created, generated, or received by the congressional office of a member, an individual member of Congress, are exclusively now the property of the individual member. And such member has control over such records. Records generated by virtue of their having been placed in an office of public trust by voters. They're generating what used to be considered government records. And now will be the personal property of the person occupying the office. That seems amazing to me. Who cares, though, whether a congressional office is, say, budget documents maintained at taxpayer expense belong to each individual member rather than to Congress as a body or the government as a whole? Well, maybe the Justice Department, for one. In investigating allegations of public corruption or misuse of funds, criminal investigators frequently need to subpoena such records. Usually, the Fifth Amendment and that bit about self-incrimination does not apply to documents per se, according to Mike Stern, former senior counsel to the U.S. House of Representatives from 1996 to 2004. But there is something called an act of production privilege, meaning that just producing the document would be incriminating in itself. That privilege doesn't apply to government agencies or corporations. But if a lawmaker is being investigated for misuse of taxpayer funds and law enforcement authorities subpoena her spending records, under this rule, she can assert the privilege to withhold them. They belong to her and not to Congress. Now, let's look back at our favorite disgraced former Congressman, Aaron Schock, Republican of Illinois. To put this in perspective, the one who lavishly decorated his office to look like a Downton Abbey drawing room and was known for the adventurous antics that he shared on his Instagram account. Schock was indicted for wire fraud, making false statements, and filing false federal income tax returns, among other things. Before his indictment, the Justice Department and Schock's lawyers battled over who held control over his MRA records. That's a Members Representational Allowance, or the office financial documents, which include tallies of expenditures for redecorating, among other things. So who controls the MRA records? How a individual member uses the money he's given by the House to operate his office? Congress or the individual member himself? And in this case, Aaron Schock. At first, the courts rejected Schock's act of production privilege, saying the congressional office was a collective entity and thus had no right to claim the fifth. That's kind of an odd conclusion to reach, if you ask me, but it later reversed and gave the government time to reconsider, given the importance of the issue and the unprecedented consequence to Schock and therefore all current and future members of Congress as to their publicly funded, non-private, public or official congressional records, according to a government court record. Prosecutors in the case were not pleased. They said, they asked this court to be the first court to recognize that Schock and every other current and future member of Congress have a Fifth Amendment act of production privilege, thereby effectively screening public or official documents from public scrutiny. Prosecutors in Schock's case wrote in a court document in August 2015, the government respectfully submits that this argument is repugnant to the fundamental principle that no man is above the law, and that it should therefore be rejected. We don't know where this tussle stands since most docs in this case are sealed, Stern said. The trial has been delayed until the summer of 2017, but the charge certainly wouldn't help prosecutors going after miscreant House members. It strikes me as an overreach, said Sarah Lord, a partner at Arnold Golden Gregory, who used to prosecute public officials while at the Justice Department. I think what would concern me is that it would extend to members' right to block production of documents that would otherwise have been treated as public records or official records that belong to the government. That's where I stand on all this. Anyway, I'm in agreement with her. Additionally, this could also put congressional staffers in a tough spot, Lord speculated. This could become a method of control over the possibility your staff could be cooperating in an investigation, Lord said. If you as a staffer produce a document, she said, will the lawmaker throw you under the bus for violating the rule? And this session of Congress has only just begun. We're reminded by our writer again here, Ashley Balsarac, the Money and Politics reporter for Open Secrets blog. I will, of course, include this link in the daily roundup that Scott will put together for you. And update on Josie, it being Friday and about the time that we sometimes see her drop by. Turns out she's traveling for work, and that makes things difficult. That's okay. She's apologetic. I should have told you earlier. I know, it's okay. Don't worry about it. We're fine. Oh, yes, and next Friday is inauguration. I guess we'll broadcast, right? We might as well. I don't think anything will be going on from 9 to 11. 11 o'clock, they'll just start to get things rolling up on the stage on the west front of the Capitol. Is he being inaugurated there? He's not doing anything weird or different, is he? Anyway, yeah, well, that'll be an apocalyptic event, but I guess we can squeeze in a show. We'll try and do that. No problem, Josie. We'll make it work. You gotta make your own life work first. I'm sure you're finding out some good information down there in Austin, and you can share it with us. Well, hell, why wait till Friday? If you got a barn burner, let us know earlier in the week. Okay, so by way of update, we've got that at any rate, and now we know we can turn to a couple other subjects as well. That frees us up for a little bit more discussion of the changing rules, norms, constitutional interpretations, etc., that are going to change the nature of American government forever after. How do you like that? Okay, so let's see. We've caught up with that one and that one. And let's see. Where shall we go next? There's all sorts of... Oh, you know what? Let's see. Should we do Trump and Russia? Should we do a quick roundup of... There's some interesting bullet points that people have shared with us. Sure, why don't we do a couple of those? Where did this one come from? This one came to us over our Twitter feed from, let's just open it up to make sure we credit everybody who goes out of their way to share this stuff. John Wendt. Yes, we haven't called your name in a while, John. Johnny Wisconsin. No, it's Johnny Wisconsin without the onsen, in case you're looking to follow along. Just sort of an oddball thing. I don't even know what to make of this one. But this is what he sent me. And it is a link to, where did this appear? BET? Yeah, okay. Not one of our frequently cited sources, BET. And we'll make this one short and sweet because I don't know what the hell we're talking about here. Here's your headline. Ready? And if you know what we're talking about, you just go ahead and shout it on out. Oh, of course, the internets are going to make me wait for the spinning pinwheel of death here. Come on. Let's see. Get this out of here. Maybe I can look at it in the pocket. Oh, I'm stuck forever. All right. Well, here's the deal. Long story. It wasn't even a long story. Short story made shorter by the fact that I can't read it. Oh, wait a minute. Come on. You going to let me in there? What? Don't do this. Okay. Here we are. Headline. Uncle Luke. Do you have an Uncle Luke? If you don't, and you're not old enough, I don't know, how old do you have to be to remember? 2 Live Crew? There you go. Uncle Luke said Donald Trump had a party so wild he had to leave. Uncle Luke couldn't handle it? Jeez, that's from October 14th. Johnny, where did you dig this up? Donald Trump has said some pretty repulsive things about women over the past few weeks, and really since his campaign began. Ever since his private comments describing his desire to sexually assault women or grab them by the pussy, you remember that whole? Did you remember that Donald Trump had said that? Ever since that all became public, everyone who's ever encountered anything the Republican presidential candidate did or said he was going to do with women is surfacing with their story, and it's even made its way over to hip hop. This story continues, and I guess they've got some audio on this, but here's the write-up. Uncle Luke, who recently pointed out the hypocrisy in Republicans supporting a candidate who denigrates women but came after him for his misogynistic lyrics, is now speaking out about his experiences with the Donald. In an interview with the Kevin Kline Live show, the 2 Live Crew founder described a party he once attended that was thrown by Trump. He says it was so raunchy, he had to leave. That's very hard to believe. Me, Mike Tyson, and Eddie Murphy, we were invited to his mansion in West Palm Beach one time, and he had all these women running around, he explained. There's not much detail here, but that's good. It keeps it safe for radio. It was so much going on to the point that I couldn't take what was going on in that room, and I left. When asked to describe what exactly made him leave, Luke's response was, it was some wild things going on. It was some things I can't even say over this radio. So it just concludes right there, shaking my head. Wow. Listen to the entire Uncle Luke interview about Donald Trump below. That is linked, and we'll provide you with the link to BET. So you can listen to it at your discretion. I would advise waiting until leaving work, perhaps. But it was all radio safe at the time, so I guess you might be able to get away with it. But people are going to wonder what the hell you're doing with your time at work. That's my chief concern. So just wanted to note that. Yet another person coming out and saying, I don't think so. This guy really doesn't belong here. There was another. Did I put this aside? or did I tweet it just the other day? I don't think I put it aside thinking it was unimportant, but this is a good follow-up to it. But another revelation from the Howard Stern show in a interview with A.J. Benza, a long-time associate, I guess I should say, of the show. And I'll have to dig that one up by searching it out via Twitter. But he, too, just saying, I've been to, or what was it? He was describing his discussion. A.J. Benza used to be kind of like a gossip columnist, right? Let's see. Let's look him up on the internet and just see if we can't get some background on the guy. But, okay, maybe, is this it? Raw Story has a write-up of it, too. Why don't we patronize our friends over at Raw Story with that one? David Edwards wrote this up the other day. The headline, I guess, would say it all, but I'm going to skip it so we can enjoy the details here. During an interview on Howard Stern's radio show in 2001, this goes way back, gossip columnist A.J. Benza confronted soon-to-be President Donald Trump about his fondness for sleeping with Russian women. This isn't exactly the exchange I was even thinking of, but A.J. Benza was on the show all the time, as was Donald Trump, from listening to the show from way back. Howard Stern, I think, has pretty much given us one of the definitive pictures of Donald Trump when it comes to just sort of the personal level stuff and how he operates in his mind. We've had all sorts of profiles, but Howard Stern, I think, really did get to the heart of it when we discussed him before. So A.J. Benza, I guess, confronts him back in 2001. Trump is not nearly the power broker he is now, certainly even without being elected to the presidency. In 2001. He said it's sort of a low ebb there. That was the point of the first discussion of what Howard Stern told us about Trump and his evolution into the fake entrepreneur of television. In audio of the program that was pointed out by Death and Taxes this week, Trump can be heard arguing with Benza over Kara Young, a woman they had both dated. Yeah. He says, I assume AJ's clean, Trump says. I hope he's clean. Meanwhile, and Benza, meanwhile, he bangs Russian people. They get right to the point on the Howard Stern show, which is why it's so helpful. Benza fires back at Trump. Russian people, Stern gasps. It's like, everyone knows they're horrible, right? Who are you talking about, Russian people? AJ, Trump quips dismissively. I don't know anything. He used to call me when I was a columnist and say, I was just in Russia. The girls have no morals. You gotta get out there, Benza explains. He's out of his mind. This is the quote from Benza. The 2001 interview resurfaced the same week that a dossier prepared by a former British intelligence officer suggested that the Russian government had compromising videos of the president-elect with sex workers, which is a kind way of putting things. The exchange between Trump and Benza comes at the 4:20 mark in the audio clip below. I will not play through it, but again, that will be available to you by virtue of our daily roundup. Thanks to Scott Anderson. Thanks every day. I thank God and Scott every day for his summaries. It frees me up to live a life. Okay, I just thought I'd toss that one in there. Other tidbits worth keeping up on. You likely heard about Marine Le Pen showing up in Trump Tower yesterday. And an interesting thing, French people love great cuisine, as you know, and she's no exception. She came to Trump Tower for the food, apparently, because the campaign people insisted she was not there to meet with Donald Trump. I don't know whether she met with anybody else, but they probably denied that too. But there's no effing reason in the world why Marine Le Pen would show up in Trump Tower at this point, except to coordinate on strategy. And by the way, I thought it was interesting and pulled up an article from late last month about Marine Le Pen's, shall we say, we'll just read you the headline once it comes up. Marine Le Pen's links to Russia are apparently under U.S. scrutiny. This according to the UK's Telegraph outlet. Telegraph newspaper. If we can get their ad out of the way, I can read you a little bit about it. But well worth noting. And more on the same theme, that essentially the Russians seem to be in contact with and in providing material support to right-wing nationalist movements around Western Europe and the United States in an effort to sort of upend Western-style democratic politics. To what end exactly, I am not sure, but certainly if you can elect governments in some way beholden to Russian interests, hey, that's got to be good for Russia, right? There's lots that still needs to be filled in all of this. American intelligence, though, it says, has been asked to look into Marine Le Pen's links to Russia following her request for a $30 million, or actually 24.3 million pound loan. I think actually, she took it in euros, which I don't know what the valuation is. But anyway, it's the equivalent of $30 million. A $30 million loan to help her fund her campaign for president in France. And she was seeking it from a bank, it says here, close to Vladimir Putin, according to reports. What that even means, I don't know. Which bank? Maybe it says, maybe it doesn't. A lot of holes in all this yet. Ms. Le Pen's Front National Party has made no secret, in English we can just say National Front, it makes more sense, has made no secret of the fact that it has taken foreign loans to help bankroll its presidential campaigns because it has argued French banks refuse to stump up the funds. That's very British of you to say. But in light of allegations of Russian interference in the U.S. election of Donald Trump, scrutiny has now turned to Ms. Le Pen, who is polled to reach the final round of France's presidential elections in May. It's a very British article. Shall we go on with this? There's likely, it's a little bit longer than I want to get into, but I wanted to bring it to your attention that apparently, over in England anyway, they're reporting that U.S. intelligence sources have been trying to monitor what Le Pen is up to, and I guess now she shows up in Trump Tower. That's a little bit weird. Okay, other tidbits for the weekend, things that you ought to know before, I don't know what you're going to do this weekend. Drinking yourself blind, I guess. Maybe that's next weekend after the inauguration. Just a quick gun fail hit for you. This one out of Concord, New Hampshire. Another New Hampshire state legislator, and admittedly there's 10,000 of them, has dropped a loaded gun at a public hearing. You might remember Kyle Tasker was the last one to drop a loaded gun at a public hearing back in, 2012 here in the article. And of course, Kyle Tasker later had his own problems with drugs and child molestation. So it's a gateway drug, carrying and dropping your loaded weapon at a public hearing. Watch out. Representative Carolyn Halstead of Milford. I'm so sorry to hear you're headed for a life of drugs and pedophilia. Maybe you can still avoid it. Anyway, it turns out, she says she's mortified now that her loaded gun fell onto the floor during a public hearing on the merits of full-day kindergarten, no less. I hope no kids were around getting ready to testify one way or the other. She says the gun fell out of her waistband, or off her waistband, so presumably it was in a waistband-mounted holster. But anyway, this is what happened when she rushed to take her seat at the House Education Committee meeting. She says her backpack caught on the gun as she took it off. It did not go off, and observers say the hearing carried on without disturbance, and she quickly put the gun into her bag. Anyway, she is licensed to carry her gun concealed, but she didn't do a very good job in concealing it. Nobody's hurt, nobody's harmed. It's just that this is the second time a New Hampshire legislator has dropped a loaded weapon in the middle of a hearing. And as you know, third time is the charm. We just not really sure what charm is going to end up meaning. Other tidbits for the weekend. The neo-Nazi march through Whitefish, Montana has been postponed. I'll bet you anything. Wait a minute. Didn't we hear that already yesterday in Justice's roundup of the news? It sounds so... I know I heard it yesterday and put it aside. But now let me see. Let's scroll back. Didn't we find that out yesterday, or was it the day before on the after show? I feel like that came up, although maybe not. I'm going to scroll back. Was it Wednesday? I don't know. I feel like we heard that, or maybe we heard about the march first from that. I can't remember anymore. And it's not immediately obvious. But anyway, here's the deal. I know Justice has commented on it, and maybe that he brought it to my attention. Maybe that's what I'm mixing things up with. Anyway, turns out, depending on which report you read, the guys who admired Hitler because he made the trains run on time. Well, that's usually an excuse people give when they don't want to say that they're anti-Semitic and supported his extermination of millions of Jews. And these guys are not shy about supporting that. So I'm not certain how important the trains being on time was to them. But at any rate, these guys who doubtless are impressed by properly maintained train schedules could not get it together to get their permit for their march approved. Although I've heard various reports, including one that they had difficulty coming up with $125 or $150, $125 for the fee for a parade permit. And also I have heard, I guess from people who are more anxious to credit the rest of Whitefish, Montana for being level-headed, serious, normal people as opposed to the weirdo neo-Nazi guy who lives there. It sounds like the locals were not interested in permitting that march no matter whether the $125 was found or not. The Flathead Beacon reports it this way. Neo-Nazi website postpones armed march in Whitefish. Publisher of the Daily Stormer said, the armed march will not occur on January 16th. We don't know when it will or if it will, but that's the story. Andrew Anglin, publisher of the Daily Stormer, said the armed march won't occur on the 16th as previously planned. The neo-Nazi and white supremacist website mailed the city of Whitefish an incomplete application seeking a special event permit. City officials said they can't act on incomplete ones. He wrote online, I've spoken with my lawyers through the ACLU, though the ACLU has yet to respond to my inquiry, and we've decided that due to the permit refusal by the city of Whitefish, we need to postpone. On January 9th, the city received a cover page of the required application for a march on 2nd Street. A $65 money order was attached to the application, well short of the city's required $125 fee for parades. Also, the application did not include a certificate of insurance, a map of the planned route, or a checklist of other items required before the city reviews an application. Anglin, who has spearheaded an online troll storm aimed at Whitefish, claims the march will be rescheduled, probably for some time in February, when it's even less pleasant, I think, in Flathead. I guess go for it, but whatever. So they couldn't get it together even to do the basics. Governing is hard, so is protesting, and I guess these guys aren't really up to it when it comes to getting their butts out in the real world. I hope it stays that way. I had some other information to share with you, of course. Lots and lots that requires your attention, but of course we're running out of time. It's almost time to hand things over to the guys at the after show. But I wanted to acknowledge, for instance, that Netroots radio maven Yuri had sent me something yesterday I didn't get a chance to mention. We won't get a chance to read it, but it's an important part of the background for a lot of you, and a lot of you have already stumbled on it, doubtless. Others of you may have been more resistant to it because it comes from The Intercept. And is it actually authored by Glenn Greenwald? Yes. So that'll drive some of you up the wall, to be sure. But it is always worth paying at least some attention to. The objection, in particular, that Glenn makes in his headline, which is, and it's a good admonishment, I don't think it's on the nose exactly, but the deep state goes to war with President-elect using unverified claims as Democrats cheer. Well, it's got a point, obviously, and it's well worth reading, and you should always take his admonishment under advisement, although I don't know that it's like I said, it's not exactly on the nose here. Democrats cheer because it's funny to talk about Donald Trump being involved in a peace situation, for one thing. And also, yeah, this is stuff that has largely been suspected for a long time. But, yeah, the fact that it's unverified, etc., it's unseemly for Democrats who said that it ought not to have been done to Hillary Clinton to be happy to see it done to Donald Trump. But then it's a question of, I don't know, there's a little bit of a chicken and egg question in terms of, well, is the turnabout not fair play, as they usually say? And on the other hand, does two wrongs make a right? Which they also very often say. I don't know. It's well worth considering and something to ponder over the weekend. A bit of a philosophical question. I wanted to at least acknowledge that it was out there. Likewise, I won't get a chance to get to this, but I thought it was interesting. I came across an article dated way early for this particular situation in The Hill, because everything I read is in The Hill because they're constantly tweeting pictures. This one didn't come this way. This one I stumbled across differently. It's from back in July, actually. Jamie Detmer writing this piece, exploring Russian ties to the men lurking behind Trump. I thought it was important and interesting, mainly because it was so early in, at this point, of course, you and I had been following the idea of Russian links for some time, mostly in a different context, though. I think the hacking issues, this is a pretty early piece, I think, for some of this stuff, and a pretty good indication that a lot of people knew an awful lot about what was going on. And I recommend this piece in particular because there's additionally some examination given to the Russian connection to Marine Le Pen, which I had just mentioned before. And this, I think, does a pretty good job of bringing together at an early date. I mean, it's somewhat less suspect to me that this was written in July than right now. Now the time is very ripe for that kind of article, but it seems a little bit too convenient. The fact that this was written up and included Marine Le Pen, I think, just validates a little bit of what we were able to squeeze in about her presence at Trump Tower yesterday. So I recommend that one to you as well for background reading. And now it really is getting time to wrap things up and wish you a good weekend. And and start anticipating Alec Baldwin's next appearance on Saturday Night Live, and how will he deal with the unsubstantiated information, possibly from the deep state, but maybe also from something not particularly deep at all. And so I don't know. Yeah, it's been a week, ladies and gentlemen. I find it very interesting. You know who else had some interesting comments on the nature of the, hey, don't cross the deep state kind of thing, was Adam Serwer. It was very interesting that I thought he made an interesting comparison and saying it's interesting that people, conservatives, who now bring that sort of thing up or who push back and say, I don't like the idea that the authority of the deep state can be brought to bear to silence a political critic or a political opponent. And that's important and a principle well worth reiterating and reminding yourself, maybe we shouldn't deviate from that too much. But it's unseemly, it seems to me, as Adam Serwer noted, when the conservative side of the coin brings that up almost in defense of Trump, because they're never around when the issue is, hey, don't screw with the cops if you don't want to get shot. I just thought that was an interesting comparison. Well worth noting, and maybe I can dig it up and link you to the tweet in which he said it. In the meantime, it's hand over the reins time, Friday, end of the week. On the day Obama expelled 35 Russian diplomats and spies, Trump's national security advisor Michael Flynn called the Russian envoy over a dozen times. That's big news that I ignored this morning, but they'll catch up with on the after show next.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Always interesting stuff as well on the last half. Here's what they've got on tap for you today. Famed journalist Carl Bernstein rips propaganda minister Kellyanne Conway as one of the great anonymous sources of our era. And dissident Russian journalist Alexei Kovalev pens a gallows warning to his doomed colleagues in the U.S. media.